And calling special meeting back to order. Recording and/or broadcasting this meeting is being made at the direction of the board, which may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. Call the roll. Sue, sure. Jessica,
Here.
Charlie,
Here.
Vladimir.
Sure.
I'm also here. All five present. We will stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would any board member like to provide comment on the agenda?
I provided sufficient comment before.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Yes. For open session.
So moved.
I will second.
Vladimir moved, Charlie second to approve the open session agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. No action was taken in closed session, so we're going to go straight on to E1, Board Governance Handbook.
Excellent. So I'm hoping that you all did your homework. And we're going to do some, what I would say, setup work. I'm probably not going to sit very much during this whole shebang. I'm just nothing closer.
Just don't use the Sharpies that are over there. The Sharpies make me nervous.
Any Sharpies. So a couple of things, I'll give you like all the things we're gonna do today and then or tonight, and then we'll do them. So I think it's really important that everybody here understand why we would want to develop a governance handbook and who is the audience or who are the audiences that might use the handbook. So we want to define that collectively as a group. You had some homework to review. If you looked at this past week or Friday's update, 3 different handbooks. One from Saratoga, a recent one from Lake Tahoe where we attended with Todd, the superintendent, and then one from the Sun Prairie district in the Midwest somewhere. So what we want to identify today are what sections in our handbook are we interested. So we're going to do some review. I have some bylaws to look at because some of our bylaws might end up in our handbook depending on the sections we're interested in. And we also actually have some policies, some that we have, a couple that we have, and a couple that we don't have that we might be interested in having. And then depending how far we get, so we've identified the sections, we may want to get working on some content, or depending on how long that takes us, I wanted to just share. So tonight we're setting the stage. Why do we have one and kind of what are the headers going to be? Throughout January and February, I think staff working with Brian will develop the content of the handbook. So if we see things that we like from other people, I think it's great. So much of what I've read comes from our bylaws in different places. I don't think we have to invent everything from scratch for us. And then after that work, so in early spring, I think we'll push out the content that was created for a little feedback loop, like don't like this, you're way off track here. And then eventually we'll see if we need a special meeting to kind of review it all together, or if people feel great about what was pushed out to them. Ultimately, by May, June, we would hope will adopt a handbook. And Lake Tahoe actually has a series of resolutions. Elias has 2 resolutions that their board passed supporting the big content within the handbook, so we can decide what that looks like. I think moving forward, we want to see this as a living document that is reviewed yearly in January and perhaps more often than once a year as things come up. Does this sound like the right work?
Having not done it before, it sounds great.
Great.
Are we also gonna do like meeting norms?
Yeah, so I think that would be a part of a section of our handbook. So we'll get to that section, that part of our. So let's start with this. Why would we want to develop a governance handbook?
Going to what Shelley had to say, the set norms for ourselves, right? And seeing the audience language, it is, we're the audience, future board members are the audience, and in fact, it's not just our norms, it's norms for people engaging, with us, so, our constituents and people coming to our meetings. So that we're all honestly on the same page.
So I'm not opposed to this.
Yeah.
But the counter argument might be that we've been working reasonably well for, in my case, 10 years, 11 years, something like that. So why do we need a handbook?
We're not all gonna be here.
And I think also given what's been going on with governance. Whoops. I didn't really to map out what we do so that we can frame up the conversation we have with the public. I think it's important. I think that's getting lost in the current discussion of how governance works in general.
So the last time we did sort of a topic on this, this was before the last election, and the purpose of it was explicitly to make sure that we had norms in place in case there was a board member who was less than enthusiastic about LASD and perhaps more enthusiastic about other parties. That seemed reasonable to me.
So it may also be, for, a person, a candidate who is running for board might use this as a, right?
Yeah,
And in fact, we can use those things that we have created to speak to this document, which is a document that puts everything in one place and makes it idiot proof, for lack of a
yeah.
better
As I
term.
said, I'm not opposed to it. I just,
Yeah.
I was playing the devil's advocate for a second.
Well, I think it also helps us evaluate. I mean, we don't evaluate candidates, they would go through the election process. But like, if these are our norms and we have observed them not following those norms, then this board might be a poor fit for them.
And there's a little bit of a board evaluation.
Yeah.
component.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean, I don't think we've not been perfect over the
No,
years, right?
No,
I mean, maybe you.
Well, one
But-
thing,
Sorry, and so Sandra's talked about yearly review in January, and, you know, like, part of our training, right, is that board self-evaluation annually is best practice. One, we again, not carried out
Yeah.
particularly annually. So it's possible that this, one hypothesis, the theory is that this will, be sort of a kernel that
Yeah.
yearly in January, we can sort of review that, and therefore
how well are we
it'll be a
doing?
spur for the board evaluation without having to, you know, hire a CSB consultant every
Okay.
year or every other year.
Can I ask why the January time?
What was that?
oh, we did. discuss that.
We did, I guess.
I think it's around, we do our yearly reorganization at our December meeting.
Right, that's why.
And so whether it's, we have new roles or we have new members, I think it's a nice time to review it.
Maybe we talked about it, we didn't sit at our table.
I wasn't allowed.
I mean, it could also be December, if January gets too crowded.
Yeah, it could be December, and we could also do a little beginning of the year. Like, you know,
Yeah, it's a good
school
way.
year
Part of it, that's
reminder,
where I
right?
was thinking.
Everybody's been on
Yeah.
break for 2 months.
I think under set norms, like what else would it do for us?
Yeah.
And what, I don't know how to say this, but a reminder of why we're here. We're here for the kids, we're here to like support good policies that support our kids and our staff and our, you know what I mean?
And so I think I heard, this is my word, not your word, but it memorializes
Yeah.
Yeah,
how you operate.
Right.
You might want to add, and also includes how the rest of the board deals with a person who doesn't operate.
Are we thinking that this governing handbook or the norms that we, like behavior norms that we set at the meeting, would also apply to other LASD committees like CACF or the budget review committee or?
I think it's fairly specific for the three that I've reviewed in depth. It's pretty specific to trustees and staff.
Well,
But I think it could be that, I mean, tonight is sort of what should be in it.
Sure,
I could see it being valuable to have a page that we could hand to new members of committees. The city has more of a problem with this, I think, than we do. But you do need, I think, a document that makes it clear to a member of a committee what their roles and responsibilities are and just.
So an onboarding,
your
onboarding.
charge.
Yeah, an onboarding document that we can. then
This is
hand.
your charge, yeah.
Yeah, right. And so I think it actually, I mean, my knee-jerk reaction is that it would be valuable to have a page on each of our CACF and
That's what I think.
COC and standing committees that describe what they do and how they operate. That we can-
Sometimes those folks come onto the board too. I forgot to send this to you, but I thought Milpitas City Council had a really good code of conduct.
Great.
It's on the front page of their agenda packet, so everybody sees it. But when we get to norms, we can talk about it there, but it does also talk about the why we're, like, we're here to make good policy.
Anything else that really different thing about too, as we work through?
So, taking off from what Charlie said, it should, I think, explain why we are here, right? What our purpose is.
Purpose and role of the board.
Yeah, but it's more than that, I think. It's, why are we doing this? I mean, you can say that,
Second, does that not start to try to address?
remind us of why we're here. Yeah.
I think if we get into some of the sections, it's typical from what I've read, like, we have a claim of our mission and vision, right? And what is the responsibility, like, what is the charge of the board? More like the moral imperative, not just the, here are your duties.
When I read the Milpitas City Council Code of Conduct, I thought that our board didn't do some work on that. So it was really good for me to see this, because I think our board operates perfectly.
Yeah. Love that, it's fun. So we can certainly add to this.
He says Milpitas City Council?
If you look at the front page of their agenda,
Somebody want to pull it up?
oh, it's up here. You want me to?
How many are there?
Oh, it's like, it's about,
And
not that
maybe,
many. Not that many, it's just on the front page of their agenda.
it's very simple.
There's some parts that I really like. You know. Speaking of one voice after we.
There's the monitoring policy administration, council will hold one another accountable to comply with this code of conduct.
That is fair.
I like it. Do we want to transition then and talk a little bit? I can't decide which order is easiest. Would it be helpful to review our bylaws? Like what is currently existing about some of these topics before we decide what sections in our handbook might we be interested in?
I think it would be useful, yeah.
I tend to think.
The other way.
I tend to think the outline and, well, stuff, and the outline, that's me.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where I initially
I'm
started.
good either way.
So we saw multiple versions, but I also wanted to share my book over there, but the governance core talks about every governance handbook should have 5 sections, and this is on page 140 if you are so inclined. And it says, so 1, a description of the board's moral imperative and unity of purpose. Speaks to some of what we, 2, description of norms and operating procedures and things like that within in there. 4, a list of protocols adopted by the board. Sure how that's different than number 3. And then board adopted strategic goals. I think there's a little explanation of what each of those looks like. And then we also reviewed these other 3. So did anybody do a little pre-work and has a list? Yeah, so Saratoga has a lot of sections to their handbook. Their audience might be a little bit different, or the purpose of it might be a little bit different. Tahoe is pretty concise. I think the whole thing was like 16 pages or something like that. And Sun Prairie, although not compiled into one document, theirs is, they probably, I would say, they have 4 sections to their handbook.
Yeah, no,
That
that's
is for sure
concise.
you, yeah.
I feel like it to be concise.
Yeah,
Right?
I do too.
Cause what I'm envisioning, and this is probably something you have to think about to vote on, but, you know, new people get voted onto the board, and I think it should be part of our protocol, but we go over the governance handbook, and it's like this big thing, you know? That's why I like it shorter.
And also, my hope is that it's concise, and we'll have clear places where we can contradict ourselves.
Yeah.
That's creating
Oh,
sheets for people to jump in and say, that this section. So the shorter we are, the more concise we are, the easier it is for us to.
Make sure it's consistent across the board, because it's less pages.
Yeah, exactly, less to read.
Well, the only one that raises a question in my mind is board adopted strategic goals. Just because, I mean, well, I agree that this is gonna be a living document, and it's still, my preference would be to sort of keep as little of the extremely current stuff out of it as possible, because we already have this whole LTAP and separate process, and, you know, we can copy paste that into the governance handbook, but it doesn't.
Or it's like
So
something to where
maybe-
it is.
And if we talk about the roles and responsibilities of the board, well, one of the major responsibilities is to approve goals and a strategic plan for the district.
So I interpreted that to mean that, there ought to be a section in there that says the board will do this, but not specify what that is. It's we will have a strategic plan that will cover these major areas, but not any detail in that.
Right, so I mean, like, looking at Lake Tahoe's goals and priorities, like, this is 50,000 foot, like, you know. Board's goal is a place where every person feels safe, secure, and has a sense of belonging, like, yes, but like, is that worth memorializing here? I'm not sure.
What if people, you know, come in there, don't care about people
Yeah.
having belonging?
I'd like to see us leave it on there for now, if we have it, but nothing going there,
Yeah,
then we can drop it, but keep it as a topic point, maybe something. To elsewhere.
Sure.
The one thing that sort of bothers me about this is, and I don't know whether it's even possible to meet my objection is, and it is, the objection is that I believe it needs to be focused on student outcomes. I mean, that's why we're here, right? So everything needs to tie back to student outcomes, but then that becomes really unwieldy, or you sort of have general, you know, this helps students learn type thing, and that's sections 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I don't know how to resolve that particular tension, at least for me.
So it sounded to me like what you just said is something that we could put in the handbook, right? Like the principle that every decision we make should be based on measurable student outcomes. without advocating for or against that, is an example to me of something that could.
So
be
I've seen agendas where each agenda item
Right.
is tied to a student outcome or is tied to some sort of goal that they're.
In fact, the
Right.
SEC DOE
Yeah.
has that on there.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Does somebody want to start with, was there one that you liked more than another that we would want to look at as a starting point?
You all like, this part there. Vacation spot.
That's good.
I saw someplace that the board members are paid $100 a meeting, up to $200 a month. And I think we're paid $25. We're way behind the curve.
So Tahoe begins with they have, I don't know, count how many, this many sections
Right,
of their thing. It starts with something right from CSBA. But it's like a general about a California school board. And then it talks a little bit about the busy life of a school board, which is specific to how many meetings do you have, kind of. Yeah, you're not happy with where you landed now, Steve.
This one, we don't necessarily.
Are these the sections that we're interested in? Let's try to, we think there should be some kind of purpose statement. Yeah, we can reorder things later.
Purpose of the
Yeah.
handbook or the purpose of the board slash
Purpose of the board.
Purpose of the
Okay.
board.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't mind the CSBA one pager.
Yeah, I like.
So I'm,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the governance thing from CSBA on research results. Governance defined, governance commitments, practices, actions, and engaging the community. And the last one is discussion. Probably covered already in what's there. Commitments is the norms, right? Governance practices. Governance actions.
Yeah,
you like that, Doctor?
yeah, we like that.
Okay, about, so
Purpose of the board,
it's
description
kind
of the board's duties.
and that's a CSBA document?
Yeah. It's that,
The other one is section B.
Right.
I think that's a good outward facing document.
Yeah.
It's one of the other items we're looking for.
yep. And it mirrors to some extent what I remember seeing in our bylaws. Cause it's credit by, yeah. Right.
We think we want to have some kind of a roles and responsibilities of the board.
I think so.
Yeah, but
That's a norms. Plus. More than just norms.
Tell me a little more about it, Stephen. What do you mean by
This-
roles and responsibilities?
This is where I think it's helpful to actually look at the bylaws that we have.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'm lucky for you, I made a copy for everybody. So I copied, I think just two right now. We'll start with these. One is the governance standards bylaw 9005, and one is bylaw 9000, role of the board. Take one and pass along. And while these are so easily found on Gamut Online as a bylaw section, I do think there's something about having the bylaw within the handbook.
yeah,
Oh, I agree.
So, you know that first paragraph? And bylaw 9005 governance standards?
Which,
Right over your shoulder.
This first paragraph, the stuff that it's saying, it's kind of like the stuff in the busy life of a school board member, which I think is kind of corny, but it actually is quite true, that we do all these things.
Yeah.
And when it says it has major commitments to parents and guardians, slash blah, blah, doesn't really say what that means.
Right.
But like this kind of does.
Do we like laying out something like the busy life of the school board member?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of content in here that I think should be in the handbook. I think the way they've done it here is actually a little hard to absorb. Just because it's like this section, the Lake Tahoe section feels like it's thrown together a bunch of stuff. Which is related, but not all the same thing.
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't know whether this is a roles and responsibilities or more of like a protocol thing in terms of like when meetings are.
Yeah, they might have played at both of those things.
Yeah.
Sounds like protocol.
so I forget what the definition was it, standard protocols, and what were the three things that were in, advanced governance?
I have my booklet right there across the street from you. You like all of them?
We've already adopted.
Oh, yeah,
That's
yes,
the sense.
our bylaw.
I mean, the
Okay,
section two.
look at you, you're holding it right there.
Section.
It's actually the kind of there, it's rules, norms.
Principles, norms, and protocols.
Yeah, I'm,
I kind of like principles. Right now, norms and protocols.
principles, norms, and protocols.
Yeah, to me, it sounds good.
Were there other sections of any of the other handbooks or content that we would want to?
So this entire book is about coherence, right? And that, I think, is something that we need to keep in the back of our minds to make sure that everything we do here is coherent. And it's also mentioned in the advanced experienced board member had that.
Which goes to the portrait of the letter. Somewhere
Gosh, the LASD experience too.
yeah,
I was trying to figure out how that fit in.
The portrait of learning does not encounter the one description of the book.
That's what we're saying.
but I wanted to call it out like separately, so that when people open up the book, like that sets the context for.
Yeah.
Would it be better to say that the handbook, the superintendent and cooperation of the board will produce a portrait of the learner and this, and not say anything more? Is that sufficient? I mean, I'm not against the detail there. I'm not sure that it belongs in the governance handbook because it might change over time. Right?
Yes, and that's why I think it's a living document, but when I think about what is your purpose collectively, it is for us to deliver. We don't have the little one, that
And
as
the
outcomes for kids and the experience we want for kids right
And
now.
If you decide to call it something else in 5 years,
Yeah.
then we would change it a little bit.
It's just, it's a section that we drop in whatever the latest flavor of it is, or the iteration.
So that's
Not
a
flavor.
section one, that with some kind of purpose statement around that.
If this is going to be a living document, most living documents I know of are printed on dead trees. So I think we ought to say that we will at least have an agenda item every January to review this.
Yeah.
So that we're forced to do it, because
Absolutely.
otherwise it's not.
Agreed, totally agree.
Yeah.
We'll live in our working calendar.
So. I mean, so principles, norms and protocols up there encompasses a whole lot, so I don't know if it makes sense to think about that as one.
Is
section
that
or
how you
subsection.
were naming?
Yeah, I took
bylaws?
that from here.
Okay.
That's the way they divided things.
Is that three sections or
Yeah.
one section?
No, three.
Right. Well, there's a lot, I think, not encompassed in board policy that we want to. So, and I don't like the way that some of the. I don't think any of the examples does it in the way, in sort of. What I consider the perfect way, right? Because I think there's sort of norms around the role of a board member, and then there's a set of meeting norms and practices. That get sort of rolled together in these handbooks that I think are actually might be better.
So I don't see norms as the norms of a board member. To me, I think of norms as the meeting norms, as those distinct bullet points of, you know, board members will respect each other, blah, 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 like that kind of thing.
Right.
So I guess it's more meeting norms and not the norms of how a board member conducts themselves, because I feel like that captures the roles and responsibilities.
Well, no, but so.
We
for
don't
example, like-
actually have in any, the ones that we had created for when shit goes down in our meetings, and we need to make sure people know how to behave in the audience. We don't have,
Well,
none of these actually have that.
for the audience.
Yes.
Right, well, I mean, like, we can't, I don't know if we can write an expectation for the audience, but.
A code of conduct.
Code of conduct, I do think we could, actually.
So that code of conduct is a protocol.
That
Yeah.
applies to everybody.
Yeah.
Not just the board.
Sure.
That's kind of what I would envision.
Sure, sure. But there's also like, you know, individual requests for reports will be directed to the superintendent.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
not-
yeah, yeah.
Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's kind of mixed together here between sort of, you know, concrete, like, here's how we run, here's how we behave in a meeting norms, and then here's how you behave as a board member norms. That a lot of which we haven't had problems with because we haven't had the out of control board member, but like lots of other districts have. And in my opinion, we should get down fairly comprehensively, like, no, you don't go talk to the principal instead of the superintendent because you want to investigate something, you know,
Yeah.
that happened at your kid's school kind of thing.
If you do, we'll have we'll censure you and
Right.
do more.
Are there other parts from other?
So another one kind of along these lines, the Sun Prairie one actually had, and I don't insist on this, but I kind of liked it when I was reading it, had a bunch of sort of do's and don'ts for the various officers of the board, which I thought, I would like first at least to look at it, not necessarily tonight, but to consider it for inclusion. And for, you know, candidates or future board members, and
What did you say it was, do's and don'ts?
do's and don'ts. It was section GC4, this is the Sun Prairie one.
Excuse me, I've never read all of this.
Whatever.
Well, I think I was saying before, I think it would be good to have a thing on our, I think Sun Prairie one also had committee stuff. In a way, and it sounded like they use committees and task forces in a way that we don't, but I do think like a one paragraph or one page for each of our standing committees would be useful.
Which might be in protocol. I'm trying to, if we're going to think in terms of principles, norms, and protocols.
If the protocol is how you act, like this is the act,
Yeah.
and principles is how you think.
Operational expectations, is it in there, is that what you're saying?
Sorry,
I was finally getting into some very own.
there's GC4 is the reference I have. What do we do?
Okay, yeah. It comes back to me.
Yeah, I like that. Do them. I always like the making it explicit.
I agree with that, so then-
Is that a word?
I like it.
Could we have, like, maybe in the appendix or something, just like a glossary of terms? Because my whole issue is, it's not this board, but like when other people come in or when like the public makes public comment, because we're not speaking the same language necessarily.
That's a good idea.
But,
Yeah,
like, for example, like for me, I had to say protocol for this and all of that. And someone who comes in, maybe. Anyway,
Maybe then a little bit of one. We have a bylaw that talks about description of board responsibilities. We've been talking about some protocols, norms. Or anything about our governance culture that is not a part of either of the bylaws.
Um,
We want to
I
include.
saw someplace, I don't know where, what time ago, that, board members were expected to vote. That abstaining or, voting present was not an acceptable way to do things, because your role is to make decisions, and by not doing it, you're not fulfilling that part of the role. And I don't remember the last time somebody,
Got kicked out of the room once.
what's that?
Got kicked out of the room once because it was, they're talking about coverage, not look too close.
But that's a.
Oh, that's a different story, that's a different story.
Thing couldn't vote on some things.
Yeah, no, but it's, if there's something you can vote on and you decide to abstain.
there was, I remember this coming up, I can't even remember if I was on the board at the time, I think it was, maybe it was, I think it was maybe when I was running or something, it was. Or I was talking to somebody, there was a thing at some point, yeah, it was before I was on the board. There was an episode where somebody abstained and then got called out, like, I don't think during the meeting, but like, kind of got the talking to afterwards, it's like, no, like, you're here to vote, you don't get to like, not be the bad guy, just because you don't feel like.
I've never had that problem. So the first like
Yeah.
3 votes I took were 4-1 votes, and I didn't even decide who the one was.
Oh, it's.
so what is the point of abstaining if you can recuse yourself? Like, why would you,
No, so recusing and abstaining.
no, I know, but I'm just saying, like, why would you abstain from voting?
Well, you don't get, because they didn't want to vote yes or no, like, they didn't want to have to make a decision, it was a hard thing, and they didn't want.
No, I mean, I understand why they're doing it.
Yeah.
But in general, like, what is the point of abstaining? If our charge is to make decisions.
That's it, but that's exactly
That's
what
the
they're
point.
trying to make.
Not everybody has that value, like sometimes, like in Congress, for example, you can just vote president, if you don't feel like taking the hard vote, and it's gonna pass anyway. Which is not the norm,
It might
but it is
come
the
into,
norm for us.
We are kept
Okay.
to higher standards than Congress. We are though.
it might come into play if it affects how many people are voting, and whether the law says those people vote, the majority of people who are voting it might have an effect there, and I don't know if that applies to us or not. I don't know whether it's, most places say it's people who are present at the board meeting, you have to have a majority of that.
If it's the majority of the people who are voting, and let's say, I don't know,
If you
2 people
abstain,
abstain, 2 people abstain, then it's, the vote is the majority of those 3.
Well, but there's also certain things that where law requires a majority or a supermajority of the whole board, and not just the people
Not
present.
just people.
So, I mean, it depends what kind of.
Any thoughts on a unity of purpose as part of our number 1?
so that would be we're here for the kids.
Yeah, that's.
And that
when
is
I
kind of the
started
9
reading
of,
this, I was
the 9,
thinking
it kind of fits within the 9,005, the first.
They are addressing there.
It kind of seems like it,
Yeah, okay.
similar. And
Great.
Yeah.
They have norm was the first section, and then it goes into the.
Yeah, look at you.
But keep learning.
Thank you.
Keep it, The only thing I'd ask is, you remember this, first person's education.
And maybe not even need a glossary term.
Yeah, all the letters. I know the letters, and that's why I'll be like, what is that? For the people in the tube seats, all right?
Board governance standards, do we have anything already existing?
So the first two seem to be different than all the rest, right? In the standards, on the first section,
For the capital or.
one and two are sort of like big, broad things, and 3 through 8 are sort of like more like norms than principles.
And we can certainly take the content of our bylaws and break them apart.
Yeah.
And maybe if there are some other pieces that we would want to add in. And then do we have something like this that exists, the board protocols?
Which one you?
This is Tahoe, page
Oh, I see.
11. But this idea of, right, individual requests will be directed to the superintendent.
Oh, I don't have. that big-
Yeah, well, I think.
Sure, does that one have meeting room?
No.
I mean, I think both of these, almost everything I think on both of these, page 10 and 11, probably should be in governance handbook. I think whether it's organized this way is.
Sure, yeah.
Is where the question is, because the board protocols, some of them are about meetings,
Sure.
but some of them are about other things.
So,
Where did you say the board member will do's and don'ts was located?
That was in. Concord.
Done for GC4.
It's the first section.
But since we are on the topic of meetings and protocol at meetings, we have different types of meetings. We have our board meetings which is a meeting of the board that the public is allowed to watch, which is very different from a town hall meeting. And I know that some of the extremist parent groups haven't, protested at our board meetings yet, but yes. I just feel like maybe we should also, because some of this is outward facing, just kind of define what these different meeting types are.
So what is the difference between a town hall meeting and the discussion of a particular agenda item?
Okay, so I have had this discussion with someone, kind of an argument actually. I said, no, this is my board meeting and you are allowed to observe it and make comment on it. But you are not, there's no back and forth dialogue.
There's no
Right,
engagement.
it's the board's business, is your regular board meeting.
And I cannot discuss things that are not on the agenda because it's very strict Brown Act rules.
The town hall meetings I've been about one topic, right?
Correct.
And people get up and say their thing, and then when they're done, we say our
We're
thing.
allowed to respond and interact and.
In a town hall, that
In a town hall.
you're agreeing with her.
No, because I don't remember us interacting with individual.
We have, definitely, when we brought out the
Well,
Egan plan.
Wait, are we talking about, I think we may be talking about two different things. Because, so there's two different kinds of meetings, well, there's multiple different kinds of meetings, right? But we've got regular meetings, and we've got special meetings like this, which are basically regular meetings on a single time.
Right.
But we've also had meetings, that we did over in the Covington multi.
Yeah.
Which are, I mean, technically they're just a special meeting, like any other special meeting, but I think it could be worth memorializing the fact that the purpose of that, like the purpose of this is for us to have this discussion. The purpose of a lot of the meetings we did over there was for the public to come talk to us.
Yeah.
Right.
And so,
And have a bigger space to do it
and have a
in.
bigger space to do it in, but then also to hear everybody, basically, as long as, not quite as long as they want, but
Yeah.
like longer than our bylaws, for example, say we do in a regular meeting.
Yes.
Versus town halls, which I think sounded like maybe you were
Town
talking
hall
about.
is
where
like
it's
what
like-
we did for when the Egan
Yeah.
plan,
Yeah.
and also what was done over
But-
COVID.
With the whole board or with like two of us?
We've had them where it was the board, but, well, yes, you're
Sure,
right.
because we've done those
You're
too.
right.
We've also done town halls where we
You're
send
right,
out two
too.
representatives to have the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yes,
Because they're not Brown Act.
Because they're
meetings.
not Brown Act meetings.
yeah.
But they are sort of an official, like,
Yeah,
those two are effectively sent by the board to have the conversation with
And then
them.
we report back to you about.
So
that.
I think, arguably it's worth memorializing these, especially for
Yeah.
somebody who's new, these various kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so it's not just up to whoever happens to be president that year about how they get
Exactly.
conducted.
at study sessions, that's. what
Yeah.
we do. Because someone's gonna ask, well, you talked to me at this meeting, and why can't you talk to me at this meeting?
So is this a study session?
This
This
is a
is a special
special meeting
meeting.
by definition.
Is it a
And
study
actually,
session?
no,
Okay, what's the difference in a study
Right,
session?
study session's not an official Brown Act term.
Yeah, I know, so, but I'm saying, this is, as far as I'm concerned, it's a study session, right?
Sure.
And it's also technically, it's a special meeting,
So the
single topic.
where I've seen it used by boards and city councils is that if something is called a study session, what that is meant to convey is no decision will be taken
Mhm.
at that
Okay,
meeting.
all right,
So if you
okay.
see something listed as a study session, no decision will be taken.
okay, so
It's
that,
definitely, the ones I've been, heard of anyway, were on a topic that we need to go more in depth. I think
Yeah.
where this is more of a talk about how do we behave, right, which is not really sure our business, our business doesn't have business. So if that's
It's hard
why
to do
we call
this.
this a study session or whatever that was, or
Oh.
special session, yeah.
so you can have multiple.
I know, I
special
understand what you're saying.
meetings.
why don't we
Yeah.
direct Sandra to solve this particular problem?
Yeah.
Write it up.
Marcy on.
He's like, and we're done.
I actually feel we have a lot of the what. We just have to reorganize it, make it maybe simpler for people, for the general
Yeah.
person,
Yeah, or Steve.
or Steve to understand.
You can read it, you can.
Oh, I really like.
Although I don't know if that puts me in a treating board member to respect.
Well, we have.
Yeah, real heavy.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
It's not that hard to do that on a flat, so I get it.
You have to earn my
Like
respect.
Lake Tahoe just has, one page. with
Yeah.
books.
Yeah, no, I like.
I really like that.
The roles
Just
and
like,
responsibilities.
like anything, like,
Yeah.
everything just one.
Todd really likes it that way.
So there is, just a nit, I like nits. On the, 9,000, roll the board, number 2, the first one, A.
Again, Vladimir, which one?
9,000, roll the board,
Bylaw 9,000.
yeah, number 2, 1A, employing the superintendent, which we do, and setting policy for hiring other personnel, we do not do that.
I thought our policy was we tell the superintendent.
Yes, but that's, I don't think that that's what it says there.
Oh,
And I would rather change it to, either omit it completely or, specify that it's up to the superintendent to make all hiring decisions.
We frame the structure under which they operate.
We do actually rubber stamp, the
It has to be reviewed by us.
No, no, you offered them the job and they've accepted. Which is the way I like it. I mean, I think that, one of the worst things I can think of is a manager trying to interfere with your hiring
I
decisions.
agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think and I think this is back to the supervision versus as they stated for there. We've mapped out what we expect principals to do. We all kind of know what that is.
Mhm.
We expect, and we know the superintendent will map to that. So in a sense, we've done that. We've just never maybe seen a list anywhere that we. Because we know what we expect principals all to do. Which is, maybe we know what the superintendent's jobs are, what we expect them to do. And so I think, in a sense, that to me is what that's saying.
So, superintendent, and, I was gonna say defining the roles of the people who are hired, but that's, even that, I wouldn't want to hear.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, Vladimir, in January, when we're going to relook at all of our stuff, perhaps there's a language change that lands there.
And there's nothing
I know
about
I also
hiring
have
squad.
some, I feel like I have some language in my contract specifically around that,
Mhm.
but I could be wrong.
Mhm. Okay.
I've done it for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can read this. I see, totally see where you're coming from. I think you can also read it,
Yeah,
the way that you're coming from. I don't know, I was looking at Lake Tahoe, it said appointments are made by the superintendent in consultation with the school. Wait, no.
I don't think it's ever occurred that superintendents made at least in my experience, made a hire that we have said, this is not gonna work.
I did,
What?
I did.
Yeah, really? And what
She's
happened?
still here. Sorry, good joke.
oh my gosh.
No mercy. I was gonna say, there's no provision about a firing squad here.
Okay, in no real order, here's what we have so far. Some kind of purpose statement that's going to include our portrait of a learner and our student experience and, yeah,
Do you want to make that a high level and have the details someplace else?
I think it needs to be in one document, and that we just know that it may need to be updated. Every
There's
year.
living documents, so at least for 1 year, we would all agree that this is the framework, and these are the details for that framework. And then next
Linking
year we
off is-
revisit it.
Okay, all right.
'Cause I
when
think the
I
idea is
think
that
about
we
our
revisit it
multiple
annually.
audiences, right, I would want, wherever we put that. Obviously, you all know that, but I would want future board members and our engaged public to understand that this is what we are striving for.
Yeah, I mean, we have a vision and core values on the website.
Yeah.
I think are just fine.
Yeah.
Um,
We're also, people like the CSBA visual.
Yep.
On page 2 from Tahoe, we have our bylaws, the 9,000 and the 9,005, which are the roles and governance standards. We've talked about some kind of protocol for a meeting code of conduct, and perhaps we'll look at and start with Milpitas's code of conduct protocol. We like the GC4 from Sun Prairie do's and don'ts. We would like some kind of protocol around the standing board committees. Purpose, how they operate in some way.
So the micro handbook for the.
Yeah, a micro handbook for them. We like pages 10 and 11 from the Tahoe, which are the
Do's and don'ts.
No,
Yeah,
that's very.
Protocols and governance standards.
protocols and standards.
Oh, yeah, and Sun Prairie does have good stuff as it relates to board, as we said, board committees and task force, like saying, and it's general.
Yeah, a lot of it's general.
Yeah.
I skimmed through it.
But it's something to look at.
Okay.
For that.
So there is one topic we haven't talked
Well, hang on.
about. Okay, that's all right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think I went through, and then something about the types of meetings, which probably will go under like the roles of the board, like here are also the types of meetings and how they differ. And a glossary of terms, even though we're gonna try to make it reader friendly. For Steve.
And I think we should call out how we make changes, and I mean, I don't want to make changes to anything, is that we have our protocol for how we change things. But I just thought specifically for the governance handbook,
Yeah.
it's the same protocol. But if you want to change anything in the gut, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about future boards of this living document, saying like, I don't want this, and I don't want this, and I don't want that. I want their right to like yell and scream and be prepared. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I like the idea of like a quick review, reminder of it in August. And more of a working, do we need any changes in a January?
Oh, and that would be the only time we change it.
Yeah.
Oh.
And
Well,
then
the thing is that I'm sorry,
No.
if we made more changes, that would affect and change the goals and objectives of the superintendent,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
sort of want to keep that constant during the year at least.
well, and so I was gonna say that there's reviews in January and August. I would like to see as part of the protocols, sort of the working something about the the calendar essentially.
Yeah, our board working calendar.
And I don't know exactly what form to have it in, but just sort of
Yeah.
putting the commitment there that we're gonna do.
One of the examples had a big spreadsheet.
And that we use that, I stole it right from them, we have our own version. Marcy updates it and we have it in our meeting,
No,
we
it's
add
not
to it.
People about the, what is it, it's basically we meet.
The fact is, it's also, you know, we have to review this the finance committee standards, the whatever, to make the adjustments, this whole thing goes all over into one place, and then where that goes. And then they will be reviewed on that cycle. Which makes, I mean, that kind of like, fun.
A master calendar is a great,
I love
I've been
that.
wanting that for a long time.
We always had a committee on finance, because they have
Yes.
very strict.
Yeah, he definitely has, you know,
That we could layer in more pieces to that.
Yep.
And they will review these things. Sort of.
in some ways, I know that our agenda, when we are doing agenda review, it's based on what we did this time last year. And then we're at this time.
There is a listing, right, of what we do every month. I've seen it.
Yeah, you
it-
just
we get-
approved it in
yeah.
your,
Yeah.
hoo-ha, but we actually have if you look at the Sun Prairie calendar, truly, we copied that calendar and we use that, so we have like our CNI updates here, our budget updates here, our required, whatever, LCAP, all those
Planning
things.
It
calendar.
might be interesting to put an example one.
Yeah.
Because it changes so much.
Right.
but-
Well, right, and that's the. Another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like.
I
don't
would
know
want
if-
to publish that calendar.
Right, that's the thing,
Yeah,
so like
because it
exactly what
absolutely
we publish,
changes
I don't
by the
know,
month.
I don't know
Oh,
whether
is
it's,
it this thing?
I think it
Yeah.
probably actually is valuable for the
Take
public
that Eye chart is what it is.
to have the sort of
Um,
budget cycle in
Right.
there and some other, maybe some other stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then it's sort of like, there's just stuff for the public, which is the cycles that
Yeah.
are statutorily required and that they care about.
We have the
And then
budget
there's some,
cycle.
some of the stuff for us
LCAP
that's
cycle.
around
Yeah.
self-advised and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But we should
Big
only
difference.
include it like how it relates to
Mhm.
the board, right? Because some of this is kind of like general information that should be on.
So,
Mhm.
communication with the public.
So
Does that live in any of those?
So I can't read them. I don't think we talked about it.
It is.
I feel like that
Well, I
needs
think
its
that's-
own
I
chart.
mean,
It's part of the,
Is
like-
it protocol?
Well, I think this is the question, this is where this is where I think Lake Tahoe did not do a great job. Because they've got a page of governance standards and a page of board protocols, and both of them are a mishmash of different levels of topic, right? So I think, like, communication with the public, I think something that should be in sort of role norms, right? You're a board member, here's what we've agreed that means and doesn't mean about, so.
So I was more thinking of along the lines of, when we make major decisions, we make it with, in collaboration with our public.
it's our job to make the decision. We will be taking their
Right.
inputs,
Well,
but it is never in collaboration.
so there, one of the, I can't remember which handbook, one of the handbooks had a section that basically said something, it sort of sounds like what you're getting at, about expectations around communication that the superintendent and district personnel, like, they will send out so many social media posts and stuff about agendas, and I actually thought it was like way too down in the weeds for a governance handbook, but I mean, I'm not totally allergic to some kind of
So,
norm
what do you-
about
The ways in which we
about the ways in
communicate
which
with
we
the public.
communicate what's on the agenda and make sure that people have time to
So there's an example here
sort of.
of District A and District B. District A recognizes that the status quo will not allow them to sustain current levels of success. So they engage a prestigious consulting firm to recommend a plan. The firm audits their status and produces a 40-page report. Right? District B recognizes that the status quo will not allow them to sustain success. So they selected a task team of 8 skilled principals and 4 leaders from other levels of the district to form a task team. Their mandate is to provide a plan for moving the district forward. They give time to engage in deep dialogue with each other and groups in the district, resources to connect with external experts, blah, blah, blah. So to me, the difference there is we do this internally and then we tell you what the answer is, as opposed to here's what the general issue is, here's I personally believe that our teachers are teaching educational professionals. And so I would pay a lot of attention to what they say. But getting collaboration of the public in terms of agreeing that their personal experience with their child is not the way we should do everything for the district, I think is important. Because otherwise you end up with the sort of thing that happened, I think, with Egan, where there was a big hullabaloo.
But wouldn't there be some instances where there's a big decision to be made and it's not appropriate to involve the public?
No, I think by definition, any big decision should be involve the public in some fashion or other.
They inform us.
So here's a big decision, and it's just an example, not thinking. We want to get rid of our superintendent. Do we need to get the public's input on that?
I would say that I'd be surprised if we didn't engage the public, and just what our norms have been. There would be discussions, hearings, it would be like one meeting done, it'd be an ongoing conversation of how do we, what our concerns are, what are the HR stuff's different.
Right,
But,
right.
you know, closing school, what do we do when we try to close our goals? Or whatever school first was like that. And there's a series of meetings going on for 3 months. What happened and why we had to, why they were trying to do it. I was on the board, I didn't go to these meetings, but I knew that, even I heard about them.
So then my example wasn't a good one, because those are things that directly impact the community.
Yeah.
But, okay, but if we wanted to replace Eric, that's a big decision.
No, that's Sandra's decision.
I'm just worried
When
about that.
I-
collaborating.
So when we were hiring Eric, we do include, I think we had 2 community members, maybe 3 community members on the panel. We don't open it up to all families, like
Right.
tell us what you would like in a CBO.
Right.
But there's an
So there's no
opportunity for,
collaboration.
You're saying something similar to each other, to be honest with you. You're saying the normal, as we try to make decisions for it, and we view it on our, so that we need to do is engage the public as we move forward. In different, and it's gonna be different, model will be different depending on the decision we have to make, to be honest with you. But I do think that it is normal that when we start to make changes, either in personnel or in structure or in, you know, we've had tons of meetings about what we want to do a middle school model from a junior high model.
Yeah.
And so we've engaged, we wanted to change curriculum. We've had tons of discussions with people around math, curriculum, and craft curriculum, and things like that. So I think we do that. It's kind of the normal how we operate. We just get the public feedback of what we want to do. So we ultimately reserve the right to make the decision. So I think that.
I totally agree that we are responsible for making the decision.
Yes.
And I think the engagement part, back to what you read there, we don't just outsource it and say, tell us what to do. We've never done that as a board.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to get that documented into our normal standard operating procedures that we will engage the public as appropriate to give us feedback. Making this decision on moving forward. That's the committee says.
To build on your thought, there is a line in bylaw 9,000 that says setting the direction for the district through a process that involves the community, parents, guardians, students, and staff, and is focused on.
Yeah, that's totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
Involvement and input. I'm not sure we get that.
So one of the standard ways we do that is by having an agenda item where we discuss that kind of stuff. We
Right,
put that
yeah.
in proposal. So I don't think that we necessarily have to hold town halls every week or, you know,
No.
but we do need to make the effort to make sure that our community.
In this, by the way, GC3 from Sun Prairie, the board member job description, one of the things touches upon is maintain a presence in the community in order to communicate and listen to the people we represent. So it kind of fits But it's not, I don't know, I do that, Steve.
I might have keys, no one comes.
No, but that's, I mean, I think that's where at a future meeting, we can get into sort of debating the specific content. Cause I mean, yeah, like that's one where I could sort of kind of see it both ways, yeah.
Speaking of community engagements like that, what are the restrictions on, if any, on former board members engaging the community in discussions?
Aren't they members of the public at that point?
Are you talking about legally or norms?
Norms like,
Again, we don't have any control over them.
So if something is confidential, said in public, sorry, said in closed session, right?
it's
And then,
confidential.
right, it's forever. So if you roll off the board, you can't like go talk about it.
Supposing we have a 4-1 decision on something, whatever it has to be. Right now, the one supports the board's decision.
Mhm.
Correct.
They roll off the board, they go, I was on the board when this bad decision was made, and Shelley is the one who did it, right, or whatever.
Right.
Is there a norm? I don't, like, for instance, as far as I remember,
Norms for
Mark
people who are no
Owens
longer on the board.
disappeared.
It's poor form, but you're not subject to the norms if you're.
Like an ND here.
No, I'm not. I realize that people have the right to say whatever they want once they're off the board, as provided it's not confidential.
Yeah,
But I'm just saying, is there a norm that we, right now, the norm seems to be when you roll off the board, you don't say anything anymore.
right.
Some important form committees to inform the public of what we did.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Ooh, okay. Okay, all right. Next,
Well, next to you, do we feel like this is enough that we found that we do have something around engaging the public that we can highlight maybe in its own section or
Well, I
will?
mean, it's like, I don't think I can identify anything that couldn't be encompassed by what's on the
Okay,
slide, so,
well, look at that's a good start.
I mean, I think it's certainly a good starting point.
I will say for the record, that I am perturbed by the lack of participation in the public in our board meetings. It's either because they have total trust in us, or something else. My suspicion.
I don't know that this document will change that.
Yeah, no, this is a comment. That's one of the reasons why I brought up the communication, because I would really like to see.
Which I think we attempted to address, and maybe it's not, right? Through just a couple
Podcasts
of
and
years
video
ago, yeah, adding the board highlights, so after each board
Yeah.
meeting, somebody
Yeah.
goes out, because we knew we weren't getting the engagement in real time.
Yeah,
And where we really do know that we shouldn't be, like, these are things that people really will want to know about, we over
Yeah,
communicated.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see us memorialize some of the things about communicating with Spanish speaking populations
Yes.
and others,
Oh,
because
yes,
like,
I
we've had a
agree.
number of comments over the years about how we've had, some populations aren't reached by the email or whatever.
Right.
And there have been suggestions about better ways to do it, which have come up, and sometimes even been done, but have never sort of been written down as a like, so that the next superintendent will know that here's what the suggestions are.
was there something in here that said, or a comment made during that meeting, during the governance training, that we should translate everything? Is it, am I inventing this, or am I thinking of
I
something else?
think it was, stated for that, and I don't remember if it was which of the sessions it was in, but that they translate into these languages. So many school districts are required when you hit a population
Yeah.
threshold that you must,
5%?
yeah, 15%.
So I would like to see our phone systems go. If you would like to hear this announcement in English, press 1. Otherwise, stay on the line, we'll talk to you in Spanish.
We could
I
do,
don't know if it's the right one, but something. At least at a, yeah, I don't know what the content is, but I think it would be good to see if we can lay out a set of principles.
So the agenda could be translated, right? I mean, there's actually not much to translate. It's just those items that change. The boilerplate will stay the same.
yeah, a lot of our translation support, and I think of Alice, yeah, I was like, why can't I think of Alice's last name at the moment? She's done a lot of work with training families on actually how to use the translation tools that are built into computers or your phone. And so like our website now has the, you know, the big translate button, that's real easy, and I think our secretaries try to support folks who might have a different language. Santa Rita, I think, has, I don't know how many languages, but to teach them how to use Google Translate as opposed to us translating all of the things, because we don't have just one primary language.
And the problem that I ran into when we were in Santa Rita was that, like, if we use Google Translate, then that's almost worse than not translating it, because then you just look like an asshole because the translation's wrong.
So you translate into Spanish, for instance, or whatever language it is, and then you translate back into English and see what the match is like.
Right.
And if the match is good, then you've got the translation
Maybe.
right. Yeah, right, maybe. You have a higher probability of the transition. Okay.
But yes, we know engagement of our non-English speaking communities is important.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we call this, I don't know, because like best practices.
So that brings up the question of, should we have a translator available in board meeting?
That I think, would be my take, that if they, if we're being recorded, then, and they can figure out a way to use a translator for the recordings, yes. If you're going to your point about audience participation, or unless we're dealing with a topic that is very specific to one group, then yes, probably the majority of what we do on a daily basis. No, I don't see that. I think.
So I was thinking more of somebody who wanted to make a comment on something, and English was not their native language, and they would have difficulty doing that. That's what I was thinking. But that's
Yeah, I think that'd be
something else.
Matt.
It's just hard to guarantee. I mean, this is again, like in Santa Rita, right? We had tech for simultaneous translation. And sometimes it was super valuable, but sometimes the volunteer that we could get wasn't very good at it. And
It takes a
it's
skill
like,
to be
yeah,
able
it's
to talk
totally a skill
on.
and like vocabulary, although like I certainly couldn't do it in any language. So, yeah, I don't know, like I hear what you're saying. And now that Zoom automatically does transcripts, I think like there's some better tool to kind of get words there in a way that, and like get suggestions. What's that?
AI.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
then Zoom actually has
That's what
AI.
transcript is.
They now have something like, this is what happened on your Zoom meeting.
Oh, yeah, right.
So getting back to your point about the does that go in the government? Does that cover like us five as board members? Like, how does that relate to how we do
So-
our job?
I could see something in the handbook that says that something along the lines of, we understand that there are people who need translation services and on it, like, just like, special ed will make accommodation for them if it's practical to do so, and it doesn't cost them any leg. And you have somebody who speaks that language, something like that.
Okay.
That translation services would be provided, might
Like other meetings.
can be provided, if requested.
The detail communication plan or the communication discussion, we can roll them into that.
Yeah.
Then-
Okay.
So I've got to do that now.
Anything else missing? Different bucket we can work on.
We're holding each other accountable, and what happens if someone is repeatedly? Is that captured, is that in protocol? Like, where does that go?
No, at no point in anything, there's going to have consequences for your action. Which is, I think, about all we need to.
Well, so it's in some paragraph.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we should have it like, again, sort of like. Part of the protocol. sort of. Well, I think there is a separate thing, which might be worth highlighting separately around, and for GC9, but, you know, around like censure, like, I don't know if we want to sort of put it off in a separate little bucket of like,
Yeah,
here's what happens if there are issues with a member of the board.
or limitations, or how, or when, not limitations, but when you would use censure, for example. Because I can just see, let's say, 5 years from now, this board is completely different. And you've got a majority that is different from the 5 of us. That just constantly censuring, you know, like one board member, like every other meeting, do you know what I mean? Like just. I think we need to limit or define how and when you can do something that's.
So we are not allowed to reopen the decided issues unless there's a majority of the board that agrees to reopen it. So you can't,
There's people who are abusing their governance law all the time,
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
And it's a really sad state of affairs, and I just wanna know what we would do if such a person or people were on this board in 5, 6, 10 years.
I guess it is looking at that whole, GC nominating and it does have.
Is it
censure.
GC9?
It's GC9.
GC9?
GC9 and Sun Prairie.
I mean, I think, like, I don't know if I would have
You can look at
seen the need for it a few years ago, but now,
Yeah.
in the environment and everything that's been going
Oh,
on,
exactly.
the area, I think you'd be calling out.
Yeah.
But
It's interesting, what I see here is like, if there's a violation of board policy,
Mm.
we may want to say what specific policies rise to this. Not all of them are, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, it seems
You know
hard
what I'm
to say.
saying?
I know what you're saying, but it seems hard to sort of.
I guess it's something
categorically say
to-
in advance, Right,
Yeah.
'Cause it's a combination of what's the policy and what do they do.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point.
So, I would, right off the top of my head, I would say that any sort of, threat of violence would require us to obtain a restraining order against that person. Because I don't think that's acceptable in any way.
Wait, say again? Sorry.
Any sort of implication or threat of violence.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you don't vote for me, I'm gonna beat you up. Like, obviously, that's it, you know, that sort of stuff, boom, right away, censure and, restraining order.
Or abusive language, you know, I don't know, if there's a board member, so my friend at OUSD deals with this. There's board members who are being mean and abusive and all that blah, 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 because there's a whole bunch of parents that support those.
Right,
kinds of
well,
things.
so I think, I mean, to me, the example is, because I mean, illegal, like, crimes, I feel like don't necessarily. need to be
It doesn't go.
Dealt
with
with
the
specifically in the stuff, what I'm thinking of, so, Mountain View Wisman Board, a while ago, had a board member who was intentionally disrespectful to the superintendent.
Mm,
In multiple meetings, just like pervasively. And I think they did eventually censure the
Yes.
person, but first they had to come up with a procedure and then censure the person. So it was a big pain in the ass. And I think that's why, like, we want to come up with a procedure first, so
Yeah.
that you can sort of
Yeah.
catch it.
So
dip it to
maybe
the
we
bottom a
can-
little bit more.
That's exactly. Then, the Sunnyvale board member, Devin, I think she's from
No.
Sunnyvale.
That
Wait,
was not me, was-
Devin Conley?
yeah,
Oh, okay, maybe some, Nancy, no,
Bridget,
no, there was some board member, either in Cupertino or Sunnyvale, I don't remember which one, that had, people come to her.
That would be Lori.
Florida,
Lori,
I mean,
yeah, you're right, that's not a board thing, right?
No.
But, I can imagine somebody saying, and I'm gonna lead a.
Well, right, but
That
if
is
you
where
found
you
out
bring
the
in
board
law-
member was
law.
talking shit, then, well, I mean, there's law, but then there's
Yeah.
also like. Yeah, I can imagine circumstances where if I find out the board member is
Is.
riling up people.
Okay, this probably is where my question goes, which is, you know, given the dialogue and need to, and what we have happening, if a board member actually doing in public and running people up, we have the ability, should we have the ability to call out and stop behavior?
So
Yeah.
there was a demonstration, right? I participated in that demonstration.
What?
At Egan,
Okay.
don't close our school.
Oh, no, this isn't about that. This is very much about what's going on, social norms happening now. What Connie did her video on. Those type of things. We had a board member out there actually getting the community stirred up about those types of topics. Do we have the ability to say that behavior precludes you from being an active participant? Yeah, and that's my question to the group. I don't have an answer.
Yeah, so maybe the
It would be,
Mountain View
legal.
procedure
It would
that
be
they came up
interesting.
with is worth looking
Well,
at.
censure, I mean, that's the thing, I think, here's where we have to be clear, censure does not prevent you from voting, right? Like, because we as a board don't actually have the power to expel
Yeah.
one of our members.
Right.
So there's nothing we can do for voting. But I think it's sort of guidelines, right, and sort of laying out, because I think, I'd have to think about it, off the top of my head, but like, to some extent, advocacy is,
There's advocacy.
there's advocacy, but there's also a difference between whether it's pre or post decision, right, like.
Or advocacy is different to me than negative rhetoric about anything.
Right,
And not anything, but about people, about population groups within the thing, that a board norm for us is that if we are inclusive, we are. In fact, it's almost like on his little speech, we do not.
Yeah.
And something along those lines to me almost would make sense that we reflect in what we do, because I think that's true.
right.
And we want people to understand that what we're doing for. Because sometimes I feel being sometimes being voted into boards right now is to have paper something that you will be and you will not discuss sexual preference in schools. You will not do this, you will not do that. Those people are showing up so that we have somewhere woven in here that we have a way to at least make them understand that we are inclusive. So back to the, to be that maybe a little bit bigger than we are inclusive in what we do. And that any and that's how to curb that really shouldn't be part of what we do. And I think that's kind of lacking in this.
We have the equity policy.
But we didn't pull it up here.
No,
So
and that's a good idea.
we didn't pull it up.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good.
Yeah.
Really good.
What's the
Remember
opposite?
this day. Remember this day. It
What
is
is the
December
opposite of
11th.
censure? You are anti-censure.
Yeah. I mean, what you're saying makes sense. I mean, it makes me like I was a little skeptical when I was looking for like Tahoe one, their unity of purpose page. It seems really super high level and fluffy, but it does kind of get what you're talking about.
So, do we agree that post decision, the board has to board members either have to shut up or support the policy?
Correct.
That's actually the Milpitas, one of the bullet points
Yeah.
is, once a decision is made, the entire board supports that
Yep.
decision.
Correct.
Even if, I mean, like, let's say there's a 3-2 vote, but the two have to support the decision.
Yeah.
Even Luke Warren, I was one of the people who voted against this, but I'm obligated to support this stupid.
Yeah, we had a
It's
3-2
the
vote
board,
recently
right?
where Steve and I were against, and we support where the buildings are on the
Yeah.
10th site.
I remember where I was like a 1, and I went, supported, I was outvoted, obviously, but then I supported whatever the board decided to go forward with.
And I was just bringing those conversations with the board has decided this is what we're gonna do. And whether I agree with it or not is. That's.
And
that's
it's
just-
a principle you live by.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I think this within somewhere is really acceptable.
Yeah.
I think the fact that
A lot of
we do
it's
that
happening.
is why our board is not dysfunctional. There are other boards, not just school boards, but they do that. The outvoted ones still keep doing whatever they're doing. And it leads to a lot of dysfunction on the board. And it gets very hard to govern because every board meeting or council meeting, that's what it's rehashed, that's what you have to deal with, it's negative energy.
Yeah.
So one of the things, we can consider also, so you have adopted in 2000, November of 2000, a vision but you can see the red there, a vision board policy. Not a vision, but a board policy around a vision. And then there is also one for goals, which
What the red,
the red is new language from CSBA. There's one around goals, and then one that you've maybe never seen before is a philosophy policy. Policy 100, and I think it talks a little bit about the things, I don't know if you wanna look at it.
So philosophy, that should be weights.
Yeah.
by the way.
The Stoics have written it, no. There's a little purpose of, philosophy, purpose, what we believe, what we value here, and it is the gamut of every possible thing. It runs the gamut on gamut, which actually stands for something that I don't remember.
Yeah, that'd be what happens. So just for fun, I looked up, full on, a website. He's got like 20 books or something.
Oh, yeah.
This guy is a machine.
He is a machine.
Actually, in AI tools.
Not real. Calling
It's a
myself.
chatbot. All right, anything? We feel good? So we will go back and do some work. Yes, I see. Right here. We'll go back and do some work on the back end and then start pushing sections out for that feedback cycle. Like, are we close? We don't like this. What about that? And we'll get rolling.
It'd be nice.
Mr. President, anything else for the good of the order?
I don't think so.
Recording.